Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome back to Season 3 of the Logical Christian Podcast. I'm your Logical Christian, Dan Irwin. The Logical Christian Podcast is not here to tell you what to think. It's an exercise in how to think. Rather than just accept what we're being told with regard to current events, politics, science, religion, and everything else, we're going to stop the spin, ask questions, dive deep, and look at the world logically. And since logic is a gift from God, most importantly, we're going to look at it all as Christians. Links can be found in the show notes if you'd like to follow along. So with that, let's go be logical Christians. How many times have you heard something that sounds right, makes sense, you're all in, and then you find out that it was all a scam, a swindle, a racket, a diddle? Seriously, Microsoft says that diddle is a synonym for scam. Don't you hate that? That's false advertising, right? I mean, where do people get off doing that? It's almost like it's a lie or something. And I, for one, am not for it. I'd go so far as to say I'm against it. Now, I know that's a pretty bold stance, but that's just where I am on the matter. Sue me. Wait, don't sue me. I don't need that kind of stress right now. And frankly, blood from a stone, my friend. Anyway, on today's episode, first we're going to make it up as we go, and then we're going to take a really long time to say absolutely nothing. And finally, well, the second segment is fairly substantial, so we're going to stop with just those two this episode. So, put on your footy pajamas and your nightcap, snuggle in for a tall tale, and then put on some safety glasses. Someone's nose is going to grow out of control and your eyeball might be in jeopardy. And look, would I pull your leg? Would I do you a diddle? I don't think so. Here we go. Well, slowly but slowly, we're making our way through a look at women in the Bible as told through the eyes of usnews.com in a series of articles from 2008. I don't want to keep rehashing and summarizing the women we've already discussed. Just go back through the last few episodes. You can hear it all for yourself. But in brief, we've discussed Eve, Sarah and Hagar, and Zipporah. Not in the way you'd expect, of course, but in a way that the unsaved world would like to interpret and view these women. You see, the Bible doesn't really do a good job telling us who these women really were and what they really did. And these various authors, religion experts, women pastors and rabbis, who literally don't exist, as women aren't pastors or rabbis, they're just sinful pretenders. These various opinion holders feel it's their job, their calling to help God out and set the record straight for us. So that brings us to the current day and to the next woman in question. This one you've almost definitely heard of, unlike Zipporah. We're talking about Bathsheba. Now, I think we can all agree that as opposed to the scant mention of Zipporah, Bathsheba is quite the popular subject. Except that Bathsheba, believe it or not, is only mentioned by name in 11 verses in the entire Bible. There are only 3 events in that entire Bible where she plays an actual role, and those events are found in 2 Samuel and in 1 Kings. The one we know the best is, of course, David seeing Bathsheba bathing on her rooftop, sending for her despite her being married to one of his mighty men, impregnating her, then trying to cover it up, ultimately having her husband Uriah murdered. Of course, as most of us know, Nathan the prophet confronted David on this, and David ultimately repented, and sincerely he repented. The child that was born died as the judgment of God on that entire sinful situation, but then later they had Solomon, who took over the kingdom from David just prior to his death. He was the wisest man in all of history, wrote the Song of Solomon, a large majority of the book of Proverbs, and most of the book of Ecclesiastes. Bathsheba, after giving birth to Solomon, is not mentioned again until we get to 1 Kings 1. David, shortly before his death at this point, unable to keep warm, no matter how many blankets they placed on him, had a young woman named Abishag, who, despite the image generated by her name, was said to be very beautiful. She was called upon to keep him warm. Now, this was not a sexual thing. This was literally someone to keep him warm and attend to his needs. Keep this in mind. This comes into play soon. Now, knowing that his father was soon to be no more, one of David's other sons, Adonijah, decided that he was going to take over as the next king. So he set up a massive coronation party with a large procession, sacrifices, most of the important players in David's kingdom. And by most, I mean he excluded Solomon and Nathan, Zadok the priest, David's mighty men, and a few others. Now, when Nathan caught wind of this usurpation, he called for Bathsheba, and he hatched a plan. Bathsheba would go to David, tell him what was going on, and ask him if Solomon was going to be king, as he apparently had said previously. when Bathsheba spoke to David, Nathan would come in then at a certain point to verify that what she was saying was actually true. Long story short, when David was informed of what was going on, he confirmed that Solomon was to be the next king, his successor. So Nathan set up the ceremony to crown and anoint him as king. Solomon led a massive procession to Jerusalem and took his place on the throne. Well, Adonijah was informed of this. Of course, all of his guests ran. They left, went back home. Immediately, Adonijah wet his pants, I'm assuming, ran to the altar and grabbed onto it, hoping Solomon would spare his life. And Solomon sent for him. Adonijah prostrated himself before Solomon, and Solomon spared him and sent him home. So Bathsheba's part in this one was to tell David what was going on as part of Nathan's plan. The first little part of Nathan's plan. Then we get to the third and last mention of Bathsheba, which is in the next chapter, 1 Kings 2. Now, David has died by this point. Solomon is the king. This is one chapter before Solomon is given wisdom by God. I think that's important here. Adonijah, remember Adonijah, the attempted usurper, he sought an audience with Bathsheba and had one tiny request that he wanted her to pass along to her son, the now king Solomon. And what request might that be? Oh, it was for him to be given Abishag for his wife. Remember Abishag, the young, beautiful girl who was given to David to keep him warm and attend his needs in his final days? Well, for whatever reason, Bathsheba had no problem passing this request to Solomon. Maybe she was jealous of Abishag. Maybe she didn't consider it a big deal, but it could potentially be a big deal. But Bathsheba goes to Solomon, sits next to him, he on his throne, her on a throne that was brought in for her, and she makes the request of Solomon for Adonijah. Well, Solomon saw the request for what it was, yet another attempt at usurping the throne, so Solomon had Adonijah put to death. And that's it. That's all we know of Bathsheba. Now, how many of you are kind of shocked at how little there actually is about her? I mean, I think we all feel like there's more about her because she's part of one of the most well-known stories and because she's connected with both David and Solomon, but really we don't really know anything about Bathsheba. So the question then becomes, what does Jessica Feinstein think she knows about Bathsheba? Well, Mrs. Feinstein, because I'm not sure which way you pronounce it, of course being the author of the article found on usnews.com, headline, Bathsheba is one of the most beguiling characters in the Bible, with the subtitle of Wife, Mother, Queen, Object of Royal Lust. Quote, the setting, on a late afternoon in Jerusalem some 3,000 years ago, could easily be mistaken for the subject of a boudoir painting. A beautiful young woman bathes on the roof under the last rays of dusk, espied by the lustful eyes of a hidden admirer. Perhaps she looks like a Rembrandt nude, all dark shadows and pale flesh, or perhaps she appears more like a Rubens, partially swathed in dark fabric and tended by her servants. Yeah, that's how we're going to start this thing, apparently. So she says correctly that it appears David should not have been at the palace, right? The Bible says that it was the spring, it was the time when kings go out to battle, but that David sent Joab and the army off to battle, quote, but David stayed at Jerusalem. The tone of this first verse of 2 Samuel 11 carries the implication that David should have been out there doing battle with them. Now, per a timeline I found, David would have been about 39 years old at this time, so it's not like he wasn't able to go into battle. In fact, it would be about 25 years until he's told by his men to stay home in the palace because he was too old to go out to battle anymore. He almost got himself killed in the previous battle. And then only a few years after that, he died. I mean, just think, David, from the time he was a boy, was fighting lions and bears, then Goliath, then armies, then fighting for his life against Saul and the army, then battle after battle. David only had about maybe 15 years of his entire life that he wasn't in some sort of a fight. How exhausting. So anyway, at the age of 39, maybe that's why he stayed home. Was he just tired? Or was he just exhausted? I don't know, no idea. But for whatever reason, he was home. She rightly says that David was married. This woman bathing was also married. He asked and was told who she was, the wife of one of his mighty men, in fact. But David sent for her anyway. Then our author says, quote, So begins a story of sex and politics that resonates even today. Most recently, remember this was 2008, most recently President Clinton's affair with Monica Lewinsky drew comparisons to David and Bathsheba, a king made weak by momentary lust, and his lover, at times both powerless and slyly manipulative. Okay, look, I don't think I feel comfortable with comparing Bill Clinton to David, or Monica Lewinsky to Bathsheba, for so many reasons. I don't feel comfortable. And look, Bill Clinton is, and still is, just a slimy dirtbag. And if you think he's not one of the reasons Jeffrey Epstein's book of clients hasn't been released to the public, you're fooling yourself. Anyway, Bathsheba quickly learned she was pregnant. Carol Myers, a professor of religion at Duke University, says, quote, "The whole point of this story is about the flaws in David as an adulterer. Bathsheba's role is part of a larger narrative plan." Jonathan Kirsch, if you remember that author, attorney, and columnist for the LA Times from part 3 of this little miniseries, says, quote, "David is the original alpha male, the first superstar. But every hero must have a fatal flaw, and David's unchecked lust for Bathsheba becomes his." Our author then says, quote, "In contrast to David, Bathsheba's thoughts and her character are in most circumstances mute, well cloaked in the sparse lines of the Hebrew text. Some biblical scholars describe Bathsheba as articulate and willful, while others say those accounts consist of unsubstantiated speculation. But one thing about Bathsheba is clear. It is she alone who sparks a sudden transition in David's life. The implications of their affair will dominate his remaining years. Through the life of David and into the life of her son King Solomon, Bathsheba plays many roles: object of lust, wife, mother, and influential queen. And then Kirsch says, quote, "I think she's among the most compelling and beguiling women in the Bible. That's why so many people have been fascinated by her." No, I'm not sure where these people are getting their info, but I told you every single story in the Bible that Bathsheba was involved in. She's involved in a couple very important points of the biblical narrative, to be sure, but overall, we don't know anything about her. That doesn't stop the speculation, apparently, and I'll be honest, I don't think I've ever even heard that there's an argument about how Bathsheba was roof bathing. I think I'd take it as the plain reading of the text, some sort of tub. Roof is generally a safe place to bathe based on how houses were structured at the time. Strip down, hop in the tub, wash yourself up, right? Oh no, but apparently there's an argument between it being a typical bath, or if she was up there as some sort of an exhibitionist, trying to seduce her way into having a more powerful husband. There's also a debate between, or I guess among, was it a simple foot washing, mostly clothed, or a fully nude bath, or a bath where she was cleansing herself from her menstrual cycle? Now, the Bible says, quote, "And from the roof he saw a woman bathing, and the woman was very beautiful in appearance." And that's all. Is there any reason to even discuss it beyond that? Unless you want to really focus on this sexy story, because sex sells, scandal sells. To focus on the bath is to kind of miss the point, methinks. But Dana Nolan Fewell, a professor of Hebrew Bible at Drew University in New Jersey, says, quote, "You can't nail down whether Bathsheba was a victim or whether she was an agent." I would personally say neither, I guess. I don't know. I know that this is a narrative that many people like to try to use to show, David as a power-hungry, sex-crazed rapist, but there's no indication that Bathsheba was brought there against her will, and absolutely no wording that would indicate rape, meaning that at least once she was there with David, she was willing. There's also even less, let's say, even no indication that Bathsheba was some sort of a strong female character who planned the entire thing for her own gain. Now, the author of our article does get the basic story correct from there. Bathsheba pregnant. David tried to get Uriah to come back so he could, pin it on him. Failing that, David had Uriah murdered in battle. And our author speculates further, quote, "Once more, the Bible tells us little of Bathsheba's reaction. The wife of Uriah mourns for an appropriate period of time, then becomes David's wife. She may even have felt relieved. Certainly, the text does not indicate that Uriah was a particularly loving husband, but the text doesn't indicate anything at all about the relationship. It's not the point of the narrative, and arguing from silence isn't typically the strongest argument. But our author gets the confrontation by the prophet Nathan correct. That's a good point, including the infamous line of, "Thou art the man." David is nonetheless cursed with a sword that will never depart from his house, and the child that Bathsheba now carries will die. This is all despite, of course, David repenting for his sin. And then the author rounds out the story with the death of the child, the birth of Solomon, the fact that she had 3 more children with David, and then moves into the story of Adonijah attempting to claim the throne. And then she says, quote, "As David's power wanes, Bathsheba's grows. She reminds David of an oath he once may or may not have made to her that Solomon would inherit the crown. Even if he is being tricked, the king re-proclaims Solomon his heir." In David's house of intrigue, as Kirsch puts it, Bathsheba has learned how to manipulate the outcome in her favor. Now, look, I'm not sure about that one. I mean, her power grew. She was a manipulator. I mean, out of all the scriptures pertaining to Bathsheba, no. The one proof the author has to point to is her telling David about Adonijah and David installing Solomon. But that was Nathan who told Bathsheba about this conspiracy, and it was Nathan who had Bathsheba speak to David. In fact, it was Nathan who gave David the prophecy we read about in 2 Samuel 7, that after David would be his seed who would be established on the throne. The son would build the first temple and his throne would be established forever. Of course, this is a good while before Solomon was born, and this, like most prophecies, had a near and a far component to them. Near term would be a literal son of David, which we know now is Solomon, who would rule and build the temple. The far component, of course, being Jesus, which is an eternal throne. He's also a seed of David as well. So, as this came from Nathan the prophet, which we have no reason to believe went rogue toward the end of David's life, I feel pretty confident that at some point between Solomon's birth and David's death, it was communicated that Solomon was to be the next king, the promised seed, at least in the near term. I have a hard time believing, based on, literally the Bible, that Bathsheba was some crafty manipulator. In fact, if our author had bothered to do some research, 1 Chronicles gives us this answer. Now remember, when Nathan came up with the plan for Bathsheba to go remind David of his promise to make Solomon the next king, based on what God had told him, and then for Nathan to come in and back up that claim, David was literally on his deathbed. He was oldish, but he was just worn out. A life of hand-to-hand combat, partially evading enemies, sometimes living in caves, a lot of tent camping, and not what some of you crazy nuts consider to be tent camping, the good kind, so to speak. He was just shot. But as we read in 1 Chronicles 22, David was making preparations for Solomon to build the temple of Yahweh. David was probably younger at this point, right? And David was forbidden to build the temple himself because of all the blood he had shed in his reign, but he wasn't forbidden from gathering materials and experts and laying out the plans. And then we read an interesting section in the scriptures. Quote, "Then he called for his son Solomon and commanded him to build a house for Yahweh, the God of Israel. And David said to Solomon, 'My son, I had it within my heart to build a house to the name of Yahweh my God, but the word of Yahweh came to me, saying,'" and this is a quote from Yahweh God, "'You have shed much blood and have waged great wars. You shall not build a house for my name because you have shed so much blood on the earth before me. Behold, a son will be born to you, who shall be a man of rest, and I will give him rest from all his enemies on every side, for his name shall be Solomon, and I will give peace and quiet to Israel in his days. He shall build a house for my name, and he shall be a son to me, and I will be a father to him, and I will establish the throne of my kingdom over Israel forever.'" Now we're back to David. "Now, my son, Yahweh be with you, that you may be successful and build the house of Yahweh your God, just as he has spoken concerning you. Only Yahweh give you insight and understanding, and give you command over Israel, so that you may keep the law of Yahweh your God. Then you will succeed, if you are careful to do the statutes and judgments which Yahweh commanded Moses concerning Israel. Be strong and courageous. Do not fear, nor be dismayed." So clearly, we see that God told David that he would have a son and name him Solomon, which is actually pronounced Shalomo, which means peace, and that son was to sit on the throne of Israel. So I'm not entirely sure why the author isn't sure if David made that promise or not. Honestly, it makes no difference if David promised Bathsheba or even told Bathsheba about that word from God or anything like that. It's going to happen regardless. I guarantee, though, that he would have told her that Solomon was to succeed him. I mean, this is a logical conclusion that we can make. I mean, there's no reason why he'd keep that quiet. But the author has saddled up this strong female character horse, and she's going to ride that thing until it drops. Quote, "As Queen Mother, Bathsheba occupies one of the most important positions in the land. Her transformation from a silent object of lust to a politically astute and vocal queen is striking, yet understandable. As an older woman, she displays the wisdom gained from a lifetime as a politician's consort." But none of that's true either, right? I mean, in fact, if you look at the third of the three narratives she's involved with, being used as a clueless pawn to ask her son, now the king, Solomon, on Adonijah's behalf, if he, the attempted usurper, could have the young, beautiful woman, Abishag, as his wife. Solomon saw through the very thinly veiled plot by Adonijah to try again to gain some foothold in the kingdom and had Adonijah put to death. Now, it's possible that Bathsheba, once the beauty, was jealous of this woman and wanted rid of the woman who comforted David in his last days. I don't know. Maybe she just didn't care. But if she was truly politically astute, she would have easily figured out the true intentions of Adonijah. Now, our author, Ms. Feinstein, concludes this article with, quote, "Yet it is as a bathing beauty and not as a power player that Bathsheba is best known. She sits at the head of a long line of sympathetic literary adulteresses. Emma Bovary, Hester Prynne, and Anna Karenina each owe something to the wife of David and the mother of Solomon. But perhaps Bathsheba is best honored by the 31st proverb, which some traditions hold that she recited to Solomon on the day of his marriage. Favor is deceitful and beauty is vain, but a woman that feareth the Lord, she shall be praised." Right, I mean, yeah, some traditions hold that to be true, and maybe it is, right? The fact is that nobody actually knows the identity of this King Lemuel in Proverbs 31, or if he was a real person at all. But there are some that believe this to be true, including, it appears, our author. See, this is again what we should not do. There are two ways to read the Bible, exegetically and eisegetically. Exegesis means to lead out of. Eisegesis means to lead into. The correct way to read your Bible is using the technique of exegesis. You let the Bible take the lead. You follow the text. You pull what's literally in the Bible out of the Bible as you study, not going beyond the boundaries of the text. Of course, there is some room for interpretation. Some logical conclusions can be made. There's some historical context that can be found, and it must be made in some cases, but nothing that steps outside of the text, making it say what it doesn't say. Now, the other way to read your Bible, some might say the wrong way to read your Bible, is eisegesis, eisegetically. This is where you determine what you'd like the Bible to say, and then you put your spin and your agenda, your narrative into the Scriptures. Sometimes you, right? And then you read into the Bible rather than out of the Bible. And this is not how the Bible is to be read, but this is how individuals like our author craft the stories they're telling us. Now, I'll commend this particular author for mostly getting the entire biblical story of Bathsheba correct. But then, when drawing conclusions, she's decided that Bathsheba must break out of the role set up in the initial scene of adultery, that of a silent, submissive girl willingly or unwillingly going along with David's lustful desires. Bathsheba must be in the Bible because she must be a role model for all women. But reading the Bible as written, she's just not. She's just Bathsheba. She becomes an important figure, mostly through her son's ascension to the throne and being part of the lineage of Jesus Christ, but I mean, that's not good enough for this author or many like her. I actually found in my Googling a devotional from Teresa Swanstrom Anderson, a blonde and pink-haired younger woman, about Proverbs 31. This is on proverbs31.org, in fact. It's the Proverbs 31 Ministries website, if you're curious. Now, this was from November 9th, 2022, entitled Claim Your Voice. I want you to remember what I read out of the Bible, or summarized out of the Bible about Bathsheba. Think of her story initially, bathing, being summoned by David, becoming pregnant, David going to the lengths of murdering her husband to cover up his sin, David marrying Bathsheba, the baby dying, later Solomon was born, and then her disappearing until David's near deathbed, petitioning at the behest of Nathan for Solomon to be appointed as king, and sometime shortly after that, for whatever reason, either jealousy, indifference, or just being duped, asking Solomon a ridiculous request, and then she fades into history. Just keep that in mind and listen to how this devotional author twists what we actually know about Bathsheba.
It takes courage to find your voice, especially when you felt silenced. The Bible tells a story of a woman who could have stayed quiet, who could have chosen to be hidden, suffering in silence. Instead, she spoke up, and by finding her voice, she changed history. Her name was Bathsheba. When we read about Bathsheba in 2 Samuel, we might think of her as voiceless. For so much of her story, she was battered by the voices of the powerful, taken by messengers just after bathing, losing her first husband at a king's word and a general's order, married to that same king upon his demand. She suffered more than most people could bear. But she was not destined to stay voiceless. She had a decision to make, the same each of us has when we face pain. It's hard to claim your voice sometimes. You don't want to cause problems or make a scene. You might feel afraid or unimportant, but finding your voice means more than just saying words. It means speaking up for yourself and speaking life into those around you. It means knowing your worth because of who you are and whose you are. God asks us the same question I believe he surely asked Bathsheba. Will you stay silent to become a victim of your suffering, or will you speak up and choose to change your story? How do we know Bathsheba changed her story? Her son Solomon grew to adulthood following God. This suggests that Bathsheba clung to God and defied her wounding rather than let it define her. Years passed after the moment Bathsheba was taken into David's home. She seemingly didn't have a voice that day, for he was king, but eventually she advocated for her son Solomon to be set upon the throne. Bathsheba spoke clearly and boldly. She made her case so well that the king of Israel listened and agreed. And after Solomon became king, Bathsheba continued to use her voice, honored with a seat at her son's right hand, a place of privilege and influence. We're told that Solomon honored his mother with this position. So Bathsheba went to King Solomon to speak to him on behalf of Adonijah, and the king rose to meet her and bowed down to her. Then he sat on his throne and had a seat brought for the king's mother, and she sat on his right. She had a voice not only in family matters, but in matters concerning the whole country. Through his actions, her son, famous for his wisdom, recognized wisdom in turn. As a matter of fact, Bathsheba may make one more important appearance in Scripture. At the beginning of the famed Proverbs 31 passage, Jewish and Christian theologians debate whether King Lemuel, who wrote Proverbs 31, may have actually been King Solomon. And if that theory is true, and Proverbs 31 is an oracle that his mother taught him, who was the mother who spoke words of wisdom over him? Bathsheba. If so, Bathsheba's voice is still heard, and her legacy lives on in King Lemuel's words about a wife of noble character. She speaks with wisdom, and faithful instruction is on her tongue. Let's be women who claim our voices, stewarding our wisdom and influence for generations to come. We can be women who rise above our pain and speak up, stepping into the story God is writing.
What a load of hogwash. But dangerous hogwash, as any time we get the idea that we can just make the Bible say what we want it to, that just won't ever lead anywhere good. She might have some good bits of advice in there, but it's as if she has never read the Bible regarding anything to do with Bathsheba, and that she really doesn't care. Now, Bathsheba may have been powerless to refuse the king's summoning of her. I grant that. It might have been, but nothing in the Bible, as I've stated, points to her being an unwilling participant in their activity of choice once she got there. God never asked Bathsheba a question. He never asked her if she was going to change her story.
Bathsheba, are you seriously going to let this little setback define you? Or are you going to take charge and change your story?
In fact, we never see God speak to Bathsheba at all. He spoke to David. He spoke to Nathan. They spoke to her, but that's all. Unless we want to read into the text for our own agenda, of course, but we don't want to do that, do we? This devotionista presents Solomon growing and following God as proof that Bathsheba found her voice, except that Solomon made a hash of his life. It started off good, but as he got older, as he obtained more and more women, he just totally destroyed everything, and the debate rages on as to if he ever truly repented or if he died apostate. Will we see Solomon in heaven? I don't know. But this devotion writer lady person seems to think Solomon's life shows how powerful Bathsheba was. Now, despite our empowering devotional, Bathsheba didn't persuade David that Solomon should be king, and she certainly didn't find her voice. Nathan told her what to do, when to do it, and how to do it, and then when he would show up to take over to ensure David knew that it was true. We are definitely not told that she had a seat at the right hand of Solomon. In fact, he had to have a throne of some sort brought and placed on the right side of his throne for her to sit next to him for this visit. If she had some place at his right hand, that throne would have been a permanent fixture, wouldn't it? And she wasn't giving counsel. She asked her son for permission to make a request, and as the king, he had to grant her that permission before she could speak. And Solomon didn't recognize wisdom in his mother. That final snippet with Bathsheba making a foolish request is the only interaction we see in the Bible between her and her son. That's all. And it was, as I stated, a foolish request. Solomon didn't see wisdom in his mother, at least not in that single interaction we're privy to see. In fact, he saw it as the foolish request it was, even giving her a sarcastic response. Quote, "Then King Solomon answered and said to his mother, 'And why are you asking Abishag the Shunammite for Adonijah? Ask for him also the kingdom, for he is my older brother, even for him, for Abiathar the priest, and for Joab the son of Zeruiah.'" And it was so foolish. Quote, "Then King Solomon swore by Yahweh, saying, 'May God do so to me, and more also, if Adonijah has not spoken this word against his own life. So now as Yahweh lives, who has established me and set me on the throne of David my father, and who has made me a house as he promised, surely Adonijah shall be put to death today.' So King Solomon sent Benaiah, the son of Jehoiada, and he fell upon him so that he died." Seems to me that if you do a thing and it ends up with someone dead, may not have been a wise thing. And then this Proverbs 31 thing. I mean, how many qualifiers did she use in this devotional? Bathsheba may make. Jewish and Christian theologians debate. May have actually been. And if that theory is true, if so, Bathsheba, 5 times in 1.5 paragraphs, which starts, incidentally, with the phrase, "as a matter of fact." No, it's not a matter of fact. It's a matter of pure speculation because we have no idea. That's why theologians debate this idea that King Lemuel is Solomon. And the comments posted on this devotional, it just shows that people professing to be Christians, and I won't even argue that many of them are in fact born again, will lap up anything that sounds Bible-ish and scratches an itch. Quote, "Like others have said, this puts Bathsheba in a whole new light. I already knew she didn't really have a choice about being with David. He was the king, and she probably thought if she refused him, something bad would happen to her or her husband. I do love that she advocated for her son Solomon. She put her voice out there to make sure he became king, and she prevailed. Solomon loved his mother dearly, and I'm sure he knew how much he owed to her since she helped him get to the throne. God forgave David his mistakes, and he chose the wisdom of Solomon to reign." All we're doing, we're adding more speculation to the speculation that she's commenting on, believing that she's just been told an entire devotional full of facts. Quote, "Wonderful insight. I never thought about Bathsheba this way." Well, no, because nobody thought of Bathsheba this way until someone decided to make up a story to kind of fluff out the few snippets that we have of her. Quote, "Great insights to Bathsheba. I have difficulty speaking up for myself and have been recently prompted to take a stand for myself. God's perfect timing in reading this. Thank you for affirming God's will for me!" Exclamation point, exclamation point, exclamation point. Yes, great insight, or more accurately, great storytelling. And now, this fairy tale, ripped from the Bible to make it into something it was never meant to be, is acting as a sign from God that this woman should speak up. God uses sin sinlessly, so maybe that was him prompting her. I just kind of have a hard time believing that God would sanction using his name in vain, which is what you're doing when you put words in the Bible, and God's word in his mouth that he never said, in order to go and prompt her or affirm his will for her. Look, I know that we all want to see ourselves in the Bible. I know that women in particular have a very small pool of women in the Bible to look to as examples. I get it. I get that. But that doesn't change the fact that we are simply not allowed to rip these historical accounts out of the Bible and strip away the context, twist and distort them, add the information that's needed to make it say what we want it to, and then pass it off as God's inspired word. That is using God's name in vain. Sadly, this is more the norm rather than the exception these days. All too often, a sermon is crafted by determining the song choice, a personal anecdote here or there, some funny illustrations, something relatable in the world, such as a movie reference or a current event. And then you'd have to have your 3 to 5 action points for each congregant to take with them when they leave. And then the only thing left to do is find something in the Bible that can be wedged into the middle of all of that nonsense in order to call it a sermon. So what can we take from the story of Bathsheba? I mean, look, bottom line, God once again uses imperfect people and imperfect circumstances in the carrying out of his sovereign plan. We also see that God, as any Calvinist worth his salt should be able to explain, God uses sin sinlessly. I know I said that just a minute ago, and I know many people don't like that phrasing, but think about it. If God is sovereign, that means total control of all things, all the time. If you don't believe that, then your God is not sovereign. If God works all things for good and also for his glory, that means that even sin is ultimately worked for our good and his glory. All things work together for good. Now, we may see horrific sin in the current moment. We may commit the most perverse of sin in the current moment. God is in control of even that. If he didn't want people to sin, people wouldn't sin. So we can talk about God's decretive will, things he decrees to be, his sovereign will versus his preceptive will or his revealed will, his laws, his mandates for us, versus his permissive will. You can think about our free will, if you want to say it that way, God permitting us to do as our heart desires, even sin. And none of us would ever sleep or eat or work again. We just debate that forever. But what we do know is that God has a plan, a sovereign plan. All things past, present, and future, good or bad, fit perfectly in God's will for all things to work for good and for God to receive full glory, honor, praise, and worship. Bathsheba played a role in the Bible. She played an important role in the life of David, the life of her children, and ultimately in our lives as she is the lineage of Jesus Christ. She has, as we all do, a specific place in God's sovereign will. We may not have books or stories or verses written about us, or devotionals or articles made up about us, but we all have a place and a purpose in God's sovereign will. And that's enough. There's no need to walk outside the Bible for anything that the Bible doesn't say. Okay, next time. This promises to be a fun one. I'm going to end with the title of the next episode of Hear Them Roar, and that will serve as my sign-off of this segment, as you'll want to take some time to think about this. You ready? No, you're not. Here we go. Next week, we'll be exploring, quote, Jezebel was a killer and prostitute, but she had her good side. Well, it's that time of year again, or more accurately, that time of every 4 years again. This is the time we're inundated with commercials. We're told how terrible the other guy is. We're told how terrible we have it, or how great we have it. The political pundits and wonks are in hog heaven. Everyone is angry with and suspicious of everyone else, and pretty much everything you see, hear, or read is geared to evoke some sort of emotion. At the same time, we have some churches, and we'll just take their word of face value that they're churches, rather than arguing if they're really churches or if the pastors or pastorettes are actually qualified, etc. We have some churches who turn into nothing but political rallies week in and week out. Some churches have taken the stand that in no way will they ever speak of anything to do with politics, and we have Christians who vote for very unchristian things. We have Christians who vote for the lesser of two evils, and we have Christians who refuse to vote unless apparently it's Jesus himself who's running for office, and even then they have questions. So what I want to do today is something I've done before. I'm going to try and do this fast, real fast, relatively speaking. But first, I want to let you know at least the worldview that I'm coming from. I'm not going to say that you must think as I do. Obviously, as everyone else does. I think I'm right, so I think it would be smart of you to think as I do, but look, that's up to you. You absolutely have the right to be wrong. I'm kidding. Sort of. I'm kidding. You do have the right to be wrong. That's true, but as do I, right? But I don't think we have the liberty to be biblically wrong, to ignore theological truth in the name of politics. So that said, here's where I stand. I'm a hard-right Christian conservative, unapologetic. All right, I am not a Christian nationalist from the standpoint that I believe our nation should be a theocracy. I've said many times before, I do not believe that we're voting for a pastor-in-chief or a theological leader. I would prefer that our leaders, all of them, were Christians. Not even Catholics, Mormons, not spiritual but not religious, not Jewish, actual, verifiable, born-again Christians. I would prefer that, but I don't in any way require that. I do not want our country to be a theocracy because everywhere that's been tried, all throughout history, it's failed, and failed badly. We're sinful humans, and even sinful humans with the best of intentions can and will succumb to the corruption that comes with politics, power, and control. At this point in our history, I am a firm believer that you cannot be a Christian Democrat, or a Christian Marxist, or a Christian Socialist. One of those parts can be true, but they can't both be true. And I say this with all the love I have. If you profess to be a born-again Christian and you vote Democrat, you need to check your heart. I don't believe you can be both. Maybe at one point in history you could have been, but not today, not anymore. The divide is too wide. The battle lines are too clearly drawn. Now, with regard to voting, what I would prefer is that those who don't understand history, both world and this country's history, those who don't understand our current situation, those who don't understand the parties and what they at least claim to stand for, those who haven't done their own research on the candidates to understand who they are, not just what you've been told by media talking heads, those who don't understand our founding documents, or our governing political system, etc., etc., my preference is that if that description fits a person, that person doesn't vote. However, there are ignorant people across the nation on both sides of the aisle that will be voting, so that preference isn't going to happen. I'm a realist. At the same time, I believe that if you're a Christian and you've chosen not to vote because apparently, I guess you're holy and righteous and can't be sullied by voting for someone who doesn't uphold your apparent standard of perfection, dude, or dudette, get over yourself. To be completely honest, you're one of the biggest reasons we're in the mess we're in. Let me be as blunt as I can about this. Not to vote is to vote. You may think you're displaying your piety for all to see, and that you'll get an extra crown and a red carpet welcome when you strut through the pearly gates, but all you're doing by not casting your vote for the better of the viable candidates is voting for the worst candidate. By your arrogance, you're casting your vote. Make no mistake about that. The reality is that if Christians who subscribe to this idiotic theory would get down off of their self-imposed crosses and actually vote for the better of the two or the lesser of the two evils, either way you want to look at it, then do that again the next cycle, and then the next cycle. In only a handful of elections, we could actually get a candidate who was a Christian or who at least upholds those values you so desire. Yes, as a Calvinist, as someone who believes in the absolute sovereign plan of God, ultimately God's plan will not be thwarted. At the same time, we're responsible for our actions. And nowhere in the Bible are we told to throw our hands up and start singing, "Jesus, take the wheel." Get in the game. Put as plainly and as bluntly as I can, I am not a Trump fan. He did some good, he did some bad. I believe he'll do some good and do some bad if he gets elected again. He's not a Christian man, and despite what has been said after the assassination attempts, which is amazing in itself, he's still not really interested in Christianity as such. There were much better choices this cycle, but he is the Republican choice. He is the only viable candidate running against Kamala Harris, who is nothing but an adulterer, a user, a liar, and an evil woman. To be very clear, abstention from voting or voting for a non-viable third-party candidate is casting your vote for Kamala. That's a simple fact. Argue it if you want, but you know it's true. As for churches, in no way do I believe that the church should become some sort of a political rally. I don't necessarily have a problem with a pastor or a church giving a voting guide, even recommending specific candidates, as long as the reasoning is biblically based. I don't think politicians should ever stand behind a pulpit in a political capacity. If your church is allowing that, either tell them to knock it off or leave the church. If a candidate is a pastor and he's behind that pulpit, it better be as the pastor. Candidating should never enter that space. Pastors, I believe, have the responsibility to ensure their flock has the biblical knowledge to make the best voting choice possible. They don't have to preach a sermon on abortion, but a sermon on the sanctity of life, how God views humanity, etc., should give people all the information they need to be able to look at topics like abortion and assisted suicide and make a theologically correct choice. So pastors don't need to be political wonks. They need to ensure their congregants, however, understand biblical truths. Some, if not most of these truths, translate directly to political positions we see today. So that brings us to the segment. As I've done before, I want to walk through the Democrat Party platform for 2024. Now look, this is a 92-page document of idiocy at best, mostly of evil, if we're really looking at it, reality-wise. And there is no way I can do this justice in a single segment. I'm not even going to try. This is going to be fast. This is going to be hitting their headers. It's not my job to give you an exhaustive biblical outline on each topic. This is going to be more of an information dump so you know what they believe. I'm going to try and give you some facts on why what they're telling you is evil or wrong or lies or whatever. I'll give you my opinion, and I'll try to give you some general biblical guidance as to why my opinion is what it is, where it fits in. And from that point, I urge you, if you have any question in your mind, to reach out to your pastor, search the old Googler machine for yourself, or search your scriptures, and if needed, you can drop me an email and I'll see if I can help in some fashion. Keep in mind that by opening this document, we are looking into the mind of the enemy being Satan, as this platform is evil. Not every single thing is the worst of the worst, I grant you that, but nothing in here is good, especially when you understand where they're coming from. The Democrats don't care about citizens, immigrants, the young, the old, the born or the unborn, your health, your education, your money, or your life. They care about themselves. They care about power and money and control. They're not your friends. And look, I'm not saying that the Republicans are the polar opposite. They aren't. And they're getting worse. But that's because Christians aren't doing their part in pushing the direction of this country. The Republicans are the best viable option we have. They're dipping their toe into the pool of evil. The Democrats are fully submerged, drinking it in, bathing in it. So, let's get started. I don't want to make this a two-parter. You don't want me to do that. So this is going to be a super extended segment. I'm hoping that the superhero kind of sound effect there helps to, kind of take the edge off. Hey, let's see what we can see here. Found on Democrats.org, headline, or more accurately, document title, 24 Democrat Party Platform. And the spiritual forces of the dark realm all cackled their demonic laughter. They start with what has become one of their favorite woke panderings, a, quote, land acknowledgement. Now, the convention was held in Chicago this year, one of the cities and states with the most strict gun control laws of anywhere, while being one of the cities with the most gun murders, just saying. So they acknowledged the fact that the land used to be inhabited by Indians. They named the Anishinaabe, also known as the Council of the Three Fires, the Ojibwe, Odawa, and Potawatomi, probably my second favorite tribe name. They name nations such as the Maiamia, the Ho-Chunk, which is my third favorite tribal name, the Menominee, Sac and Fox, Peoria, Kaskaskia, Wea, Kickapoo, there it is, that's my favorite one, and Mascoutin. Now, what they won't tell you is that various tribes were constantly at war with other tribes, and land was being taken over by different tribes time and time again, long before we ever got here. They'd like to make us believe that the Indians were peaceful and we are the colonizers, but if they really felt that we unjustly stole indigenous lands, why aren't cities or states that are solidly blue not just giving the land back at this point? Why are they not admitting that their very own Democrat, Andrew Jackson, was the evil human that's credited with the Trail of Tears, and why are they not trying to right those wrongs? And the answer is because politicians, and even more so Democrats, are liars and blowhards. They don't care about indigenous people. They care about pandering for votes. Okay, moving on. They have a preamble that basically says Orange Man bad. He's going to enact vengeance on his political opponents, even though that's what they're literally doing right now. He's going to eliminate your freedoms, which is what they're literally doing right now. He's going to, quote, dictate what healthcare decisions women can make. which means he's going to outlaw abortion, which he absolutely is not going to do. And one of the problems that real Christians have with him, in fact, is that he's not going to do that. They say he's going to ban books. Of course, by ban books, they mean literal pornography, mostly LGBTQIA2+ pornography from school libraries, especially elementary and middle school libraries. He's going to tell people who they can love, except that prior to Biden, he was literally the most pro-gay president this country has ever seen. He's going to give tax cuts to big business, which, yeah, I hope so. That literally promotes economic growth every single time. He's going to create a new national sales tax, which is what they're calling a tariff on imports from countries that are trying to destroy whatever industry we have left here. And of course, he's going to get rid of Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, et cetera, et cetera. Except that that's never been on a Republican platform ever. Those things should be phased out. I believe that because this bankrupt country won't be able to afford this much longer. But no, that's not a thing. That's literally not a thing any real Republican candidate has ever proposed or even believes could happen. Of course, on their end, they've created 16 million jobs. Except that nearly all of those, of course, are nothing but rebound jobs from COVID lockdowns, and most of the rest are either part-time jobs or jobs for illegals. They're fighting for your health care and drug prices, which I think we can all tell that, right? I mean, isn't it? It's like the best ever. They're trying to force you and I to pay for student loans of people who took them out with full knowledge they'd have to pay them back, but now they don't want to, for reasons. They're fixing violence, apparently, and again, I mean, it can be felt. It's tangible, isn't it? That's not to mention the fact that they are absolute war hawks now. I mean, not directly, but they like to fight Russia through Ukraine for the rest of eternity. They'd like to see Israel get absolutely decimated. They can't say that. All right. They're actually claiming to be securing the border, and I don't think they know what that means. They're rebuilding our roads and bridges, which is a thing that's said every single election cycle, and it never seems to happen, no matter how much money we put into it. They're closing racial pay gaps and gender pay gaps, which, as all real data shows, those gaps don't actually exist. Not when you look at all the data. And of course, they're going to tackle the climate crisis, which also isn't a real thing. They're going to secure energy independence, which Trump literally had done, and they came in and screwed that up. They're going to fix gun violence by taking your guns away if they can pull that off. And they're going to create unity. Are you feeling it? Unity? Yeah, you are. In their final paragraphs of their little intro, preamble, whatever they call it thing, they do say two very, very true statements. Quote, President Biden, Vice President Harris, and Democrats are running to finish the job. Oh, yes. They are running to finish the job. This is not something we want them to do. Finishing the job that they're doing, the direction they're going, means the United States is a democracy in the same way that Russia or China is then. A communist, socialist, pseudo-democracy. And then the other thing they said, quote, we must stand together to choose what we want America to be. And that is absolutely correct. If Christians play the holier-than-thou card and abstain from voting, if Republicans and conservatives split their votes for unviable third-party candidates who can't win in some sort of a display of protest or whatever, then the Democrats, under whoever's pulling cackling Kamala strings, will dictate what America will be. I don't think you want that. Okay, the body of this platform has 9 main headers. We're going to run through them as quickly as I can, I promise. First, quote, growing our economy from the bottom up and middle out. Now, quite literally, this is the same old song and dance they do every single time. Trickle-down economics bad, redistribution of tax dollars to those in the lower and middle class through various government programs, good. The problem is that, and someone can correct me here if I'm wrong, nobody has ever worked for a poor person. We're all working for companies and or people who have more money than us because that's how that works. Not to mention the fact that tax cuts for business and the working class has always promoted economic improvement. Trump quite literally had our economy rocking, and he had it firing back up during COVID as he was leaving office. The Dems came in and crushed it. Thus the out-of-control inflation that we've seen. You know, your gas prices, your food prices, durable goods prices, everything prices. They give the same lines we always hear. Invest in infrastructure, invest in manufacturing, create just wonderful jobs, and push unions into everything and everywhere. Interesting side note, we've got Boeing on strike. Got a few automakers looking at strikes. Got a major East Coast port that's threatening strikes. Yeah, unions are going to save the country, by shutting it down and holding it hostage and bankrupting the companies they work for. Sounds like a solid plan. They talk about small business. Now, these are the same small businesses they forced to close down, destroying countless lives during the COVID so-called pandemic. Then they talk about agriculture and how important it is. Problem is, despite what they say, their actions speak louder. They hate agriculture, or more accurately, they hate it for you and I. See, fertilizer and beef, too many greenhouse gases there. Their preference is for that to just go away and let big government take over food production. Don't look at what they say, look at what they do. Now, if you like crickets and mealworms and other bugs used for protein, then the Democrats are your guys. And of course, they want to fight poverty. And how? Well, by handouts, of course. More and more government handouts. Not by trying to get people off of government assistance, by increasing the dependence on government assistance. The Bible's very clear that if you don't work, you don't eat. We are not meant to be beholden to a government. Nowhere in the Bible are we told that the government should take our money and redistribute it to others. The Democrats want socialism. That's government control of money and means of production. We all work for them, and we all receive all good things from them, and all will be right with the world. You cannot government program, raise minimum wage, and mandate blackmailing, bullying union your way into prosperity. It doesn't work. Their next point is, quote, rewarding work, not wealth. Except that if you were to compare the two parties, they have many more rich people on their side for some reason. And if you look at both conventions, all they had were uber rich talking heads and celebrities marching onto stage like they know what matters, like they think they know what matters. But their plan is to make the tax code fair. And by fair, they mean they want to cut taxes for the middle class, which they absolutely won't do, and raise them on the evil corporations and the rich. Problem is, the rich didn't get there by being stupid. Most of them. There's a few. Mark Cuban, for one. Most of them, though, no. Manufacturers don't do what they do in order to lose money. And eventually you run out of rich people's money. See, the tax code is already grossly unfair. They want to make it even more skewed. This is socialism. Again, it's robbing the rich to give to the poor. No free country can thrive or even survive with that kind of a system. The other problem is that once they finally admit that they can't do what they want to do with their so-called, rich people's money, then they have to start lowering the threshold and taxing those with lower incomes more and more. Again, this never works. This just creates more poverty, and it destroys manufacturing, bankrupts the job creators, and sinks us lower and lower as a country. And this is in a country that's already spending more in interest payments on our debt in a year than we do on our military in the year. We can't keep playing with the Democrats' ideas. We need to allow businesses to open wide open, create jobs, create profit, create investment, and create wealth for all involved. What drives this narrative, though, is greed and envy. If a CEO makes $100 million a year, and I make, let's say, $80,000 or $100,000 a year, and I can feed my family, and I have a good work-life balance, and I can manage my budget, why do I care? Or more importantly, why do I think I deserve a piece of the CEO's salary? Stay in your lane. For that matter, why are they okay with celebrities and athletes being paid so much? Shouldn't all tickets be free? Shouldn't they be the ones to fund the new stadiums? But no, that money, that's okay. But not a CEO who manages a company that provides thousands of jobs. Next, they want to, quote, lower costs. Okay, look, they're flat out lying here. They say that inflation has come down, but corporations who hiked prices and doubled profits refuse to drop their prices now. But the Democrats, through their stupid economic policies, actually took a sub-2% inflation rate when Trump left and jacked it north of 9%. That means that you're paying a lot more for the same thing you bought, before, for much less. And now inflation has settled back down to somewhere around 3%. So that means that you're still paying more now for the same thing that you bought before for less, which was more than the time you bought it before for less than that. It's just that the increased amount now is less than the increased amount then. Inflation going down doesn't mean the costs or the prices go down. It means they go up slower. Now, are companies and manufacturers making record profits? I don't know. Maybe some are. I don't really care. That's where capitalism comes in. If their prices are too high, the consumer looks elsewhere. If there is nowhere else to look in a true capitalist economy, which is directly opposite of a socialist economy, someone will see the need for another option and create that option. If you look at McDonald's and fast food in general, that's what's happening to them. The $5 menus or the $1 items, all those disappeared a few years ago, and expendable cash disappeared, and the customer base was disappearing. So they brought back these options and menus, probably at a very thin profit margin, if anything, in order to win back customers. We're seeing just about every car manufacturer back off of their EV adoption because the consumer doesn't want some garbage EV. That's called capitalism. That's the free market. What the Dems want to do is called price control. They want to force companies, grocery stores, whoever, to charge only what they're allowed to charge, regardless of the production cost. Any economist worth his salt will admit that price controls never work. It always backfires because it's another communist tactic, and communism has never produced prosperity. They also tout the Trump tax because of tariffs thing, but here's the thing. Let's take EVs. If China is allowed to dump small EVs into this country for a half the price or less than other EVs produced in this country or for this country, where do you think the bulk of the money goes? It's going to go to China. So what happens here? Well, companies lose even more money. Production is slowed or eliminated. People are laid off or eliminated. And that goes for everything. There's no perfect answer to this. I mean, there just isn't. But Trump is trying to save American manufacturing and stop even more money going to a country that is literally our enemy. The Democrats want to lie about our own manufacturers and turn a blind eye to other countries. We can argue as to what their reasoning is, but that's what they want to do. They talk about healthcare and prescription drugs, but if they could lower these costs, why haven't they done it yet? Didn't they promise lower costs with Obamacare? How did that work out? Again, socializing healthcare and making it government run, which is what they and Kamala specifically want to do, and price fixing, it's all socialist or communist tactics. These never work. It's never worked in any country that's tried it. I mean, not without massive taxes on everyone. And even at that, there are shortages. There's rationing. They don't have enough equipment. They're now starting to turn to assisted suicide to take care of some of their overcrowding problems. Now, they're not going to say that, but if you look at their policies and if you look at how they're changing, well, that's exactly what they're doing. Communism, which is just the next very short step after socialism, always ends up with millions dead because humans hold no importance. They're a means of production. They're an unfortunate inconvenience. And of course, when they talk about lowering costs, they're also talking about giving more handouts, redistributing money to their favored people, whether that's union, poverty-stricken, those with certain skin colors or gender identities. And more people are beholden to the government for their very existence. That's not a good thing. Giving money to first-time home buyers will only increase housing prices. Giving more free college money or the government paying for the loans of others only raises the prices of tuition, just like it did when the government got into the almost certainly guaranteed loan business for college in the first place. They want to give more money to schools or teachers' unions or whatever, which has never worked in the past, so we might as well keep doing it. Okay, moving along. The next section is, quote, tackling the climate crisis, lowering energy costs, and securing energy independence. All right. Well, per their theories, you can't do all of those, at least not at the same time. You could theoretically tackle the so-called climate crisis, but you won't lower energy costs. And if you're energy independent, it won't be in a good way. You could lower energy costs and be energy independent. In fact, that's what Trump had done before Biden screwed it up again. But you're not going to do the things they believe need to be done to tackle the mythical climate crisis. Their theory of windmills and pinwheels and solar cells and unicorn farts and feelings of joy and superiority aren't going to make us energy independent. It's going to destroy us, as those aren't now, and I'd argue won't ever be viable or reliable sources of power, not for any more than the, 20-ish% that they're currently contributing to the grid. They go through all of their fear-mongering about how we must do something now and it's more urgent than ever and it's so hot. It's just so hot. I've covered it enough for you to know that they really have no basis for this claim. It's nothing but a made-up crisis for purposes of money, power, and control. If they get their way, say goodbye to natural gas appliances and equipment in the home. Say goodbye to gasoline-powered vehicles and tools. Say goodbye to reliable power sources. But one thing you won't say goodbye to calls for more. More cuts, more changes, more climate saving this and that, more cost that you're going to have to pay for your energy. This is one of the biggest lies of the Democrat Party, and that's really saying something. But don't worry, they'll also tax you more, to offset that carbon you're pumping into the air, and they'll heavily tax companies, which you'd think they'd admit will raise our prices for things, just like the so-called Trump tariff, but no, they're not gonna tell you that. And if they do succeed in removing carbon from the air, well, say goodbye to the greenest world we've seen in the modern era and say hello to rolling famines across this world. See, the plants, for some reason, seem to love the CO2 that's in the air. They just crave it. But we don't want it there, so screw you, plants. And look, the environment is people too. Doggone it, right? So we need some environmental justice. Okay, so that's actually, even though there are those who believe what I just said, this phrase, environmental justice, this is actually to bring equity and justice to people most affected by pollution, which somehow are always some sort of minority or whatever. Now, I'm not quoting much out of this massive document because, it's mostly just trash, but this is one I just must quote here. Quote, "Too many parents still lie awake at night worrying what the rain or soil or water or air is doing to their kids." Are they? Do they? Because, get a life if that's you. The only people that this may apply to are those that have been fully brainwashed by the leftist fear-mongering. It's quite likely we could identify them by their continued wearing of masks in public. But this, along with a few other topics, are just, are not just national. These are actually globally pushed, okay? This climate thing is pushed by much bigger players in the UN and the WEF. See, this is why I'd say probably Bush Sr., definitely Clinton, George W. Bush, Obama, and Biden are all basically fine as president, as Harris would be. They're all playing for the same side, so we can have any of them in that slot. Now, sure, the letter's different. I grant it. One is an R, one is a D, but they're all doing what they're being told to do. Trump, love him or hate him, Trump was the disruptor to this. He wasn't interested in being a global cabal's do-boy. And side note, I don't believe J.D. Vance is either. I don't believe that DeSantis, who incidentally was the best choice for presidential candidate, he isn't either. All right, enough of this climate nonsense. God is sovereign. He created this earth. He created how it works. He created man, the formation process of oil. He foreordained our discovery and use of fossil fuels. We, humans, are small potatoes as compared to everything that goes into how this world works. We're simply not destroying the climate because we can't. And we're not going to save the climate because we can't. The climate and environment will take care of itself. It's designed to do so and has proven time and time again that it's fully capable of functioning as designed. All right, our next topic goes right along with all the large blue cities, especially Chicago, where this year's Democrat convention was held, just leading the way for us here. Quote, gun safety. Yeah, this is one that really gets me. The gun topic is exactly like the smoking topic. Everyone is on board with anti-smoking campaigns because all these political people, they just really care about your health. But they kind of like all the revenue that smokers bring into various coffers, so they kind of want you to keep on smoking and maybe smoke more, but stop smoking, but keep smoking. With regard to gun safety, the Democrats want to control guns, or actually just remove guns from the hand of those, that they don't want to have them, so they can, save just one life. While at the same time, they absolutely love when mass shootings occur, especially when kids are involved, because it helps them push their narrative and helps them move one step closer to removing our Second Amendment rights, which they absolutely hate because that stops them from doing things. But Dan, are you honestly saying they want kids to die? Yes, I am. They start drooling from their blood-stained fangs every time a school shooting takes place. As proof, simply look at who says what and how fast in the media as soon as a shooting takes place. But here's the thing, and I've been watching this closer lately. Look at who the gun violence is coming from. Lately, it's been the trannies and the kids who have been brainwashed by the demonic LGBTQIA2+ hordes, but almost every time, it's someone who identifies with the left. Maybe not a Democrat exactly, but someone on the left side of the political spectrum. To be honest, I'm starting to become more and more of a gun control advocate. I think that anyone who identifies themselves with anything left of center on the political spectrum shouldn't be allowed to own a gun. Or at least the default is that they're mentally compromised and unsafe, and then we can work on determining if they're one of the exceptions to that rule. The simple reality is that if we allowed the average citizen the right to constitutional carry so as to be able to protect themselves and others, and we took guns out of the hands of those on the left, gun violence would drop like a rock, mark my words. As Michael Savage said many, many years ago, liberalism is a mental disorder, which is absolutely true and becoming more and more visible as they're becoming more psychotic by the day. And I just kind of think that those with psychotic disorders, maybe they shouldn't be legal gun owners. Okay, as for their platform on guns, who cares? Something about policing, even though they hate the police. Kamala herself helped to get violent criminals back on the street and wanted to defund police and remove security officers from schools. They care deeply about violence against women. Unless, of course, you're a guy pretending to be a woman, in which case, how dare you say anything against them at all? And they say something about gun safety, which basically boils down to them owning guns. You and I, not so much owning guns. I don't know, whatever. Moving on. Quote, strengthening democracy, protecting freedoms, and advancing equity. Now make no mistake. The real focus is the last one, and they'll destroy democracy as they did through rigging, the primary process in Biden's favor and then enacting a coup against him and installing Harris as the candidate without one person ever casting a vote for her, ever. And they'll take any freedom you think you have in order to advance their perverted idea of equity. That's what's important. They start with talking about judges, saying that Biden cares about democracy because he appointed a black woman judge. Hashtag democracy. And that Trump doesn't care because he appointed right-leaning judges, except that as a Christian conservative, those judges, especially Amy Coney Barrett, is an absolute disappointment and disgrace in nearly everything she's done, which is what we do on the right. We pretty much just screw things up all the time. But don't worry. If Harris gets in, she'll appoint a slew of left-wing judges, which is, defending democracy, I guess somehow. I think it has to do with them getting their way. That's kind of what they want, right? But don't quote me on that. They'll also make sure those judges are, not so much the best for the job, the most qualified for the job, but more so people who will do as they're told and also tick as many DEI boxes as possible. They care about voting rights. Again, not so much yours or mine. The voting rights more for the illegals because apparently black and brown people are too stupid to figure out how to get an ID. An ID they need for infinity other things in life. And those who are here illegally simply can't get IDs, except for the states where they can get IDs. So we just need to let anyone vote. In fact, I believe the Democrats' get out the vote slogans are something like vote early, vote often, something like that, or be a voter for life, even when you're dead. I don't know. I might have those wrong. Probably not, though. They say they want to stop special interests. Yeah, nobody believes either party wants to do that. See, special interest groups have something that all politicians really seem to like, money. We'll just move on from there. And then a section on reproductive freedom. So apparently, Trump wants to put cameras and officers in every bedroom to make sure you're not breaking the rules. Plus, he's going to ban IVF and birth control and condoms and the gays and everything. That he's just a terrible person, basically, is what it comes down to. Except for the fact that none of that's true. Some of that should actually be discussed and debated, to be honest. But with Trump, none of that's true. What the left wants to do is let anyone do anything, and then if any consequence of that action takes place, they want people to have the right to kill their baby anytime. And don't let their lies fool you. They literally want the right to put a newborn who survived an abortion, just to the side and just let the child die. They've already done it in multiple states multiple times. Thousands of times, actually, by some count. Vice presidential candidate Tim Walz, who I'm convinced is a closeted gay and a pedo, signed the bill into law in Minnesota that's resulted in at least 5 newborns being put to the side to die. This issue alone should disqualify any and all Democrats from running for anything and should disqualify them from being in public or polite society. This is called murder. If you're a Christian and you vote for a Democrat, you're not a Christian. Based on this one single issue, you can't be. If you can prove me wrong, I'd sure love to hear your argument. Then a section on women's rights. But remember, the hierarchy goes perverted, severely mentally and spiritually sick men who pretend to be women, and then real women's rights. So women's rights don't really mean what they used to mean anymore. However, for some reason, young adult and middle-aged white women are a voting bloc that goes heavily for the Democrats every single time. Knock it off. You're voting for pure evil. You're voting for people who literally hate you and would rather replace you with some degenerate man. It makes no difference what they say about women's rights until they can define woman accurately, which excludes men who should be patients in mental hospitals. So until they can do that, whatever they say is moot. Of course, they have sections on LGBTQI+, which I'm not sure why they don't care about the other Q or the A, and a section on racial equality. Now, I group those two together because they see them as the same. They see both of them as a civil rights issue. Just like it's not your fault that you're black, it's not your fault that you're the gay. Now, that's stupid, but okay, that's where they stand. And they don't want equal rights for various minorities. They want more rights for them than for other people because something. I don't know. What we should focus on is treating everyone the same under the law. You know, justice is supposed to be blind. But no, we must give special consideration to anyone and everyone who isn't white. That's equality, somehow. This is America. We're a land of opportunity. And those opportunities extend equally to all people. If you're a company who discriminates through the power of the free market, you probably won't survive. If you're a person who has taken their freedom of expression and absolutely destroyed yourself, made yourself look or act like some sort of a hell beast, well, the fact that you're not considered for a job is on you. You made your choice. Now you have to live with your choice. It's not the job of the government to prop you up because you did a stupid. Sorry. They have something in there about people with disabilities, about tribal nations, and then, quote, combating hate and protecting freedom of religion. And again, look, religion means all religions that aren't Christian because Trump hates Islam or something like that, right? So we have to go and prop them up. Literally, nearly the entire section of religion has to do with Muslims and the so-called Muslim ban that was enacted by Trump and Asian hate from Trump during the COVID pandemic. Except that Trump didn't ban Muslims. He banned people from entering into our country who came from terrorist nations. It's not his fault that they were Muslim. Not all Muslims are terrorists, although per their own text they're called to be, but nearly all terrorists are Muslim. That's simply a fact. I'd rather not have terrorists come waltzing into the country, although, well, here we are. As for Asian hate, yeah, although the left says that Trump did nothing during the COVID pandemic and allowed billions of people to die or something, he actually shut down the borders, not allowing those from China to come in, which anyone analyzing the data honestly has concluded that likely saved at least thousands of lives by taking that action. But of course, the fact that he did that and that they were Asians, well, that's Asian hate. I can't win either way. Whatever. They also believe in the freedom of the press. The freedom of the press. You know, like ABC's freedom to collude with Kamala Harris and the Democrats to gang up on Trump during their only single debate. You know, freedom. Or at least freedom of the press to print the stories they're allowed to print in the way, you know, they're allowed to print them per the Democrat Party's, their approval. I guess that's freedom. Hashtag freedom. The next section is, quote, securing our border and fixing the broken immigration system. LOL? What? I mean, the first thing they did when they came into office was rescind all of the actions Trump put in place to at least slow the flow of illegals. And since then, we've had record illegal incursion into our country month after month after month. This is an invasion of our country, literally. And the Democrats not only are allowing it, but are encouraging it. Now, I know the border czar has done as much as she possibly could that didn't involve anything to do with the border or even going down there. I know they're claiming much lower numbers of infiltrating illegals now. That's simply a classification exercise. They're classifying and counting illegals differently, which allows them to hide and fudge the numbers to make it look like they're doing something. They're not. They also want to claim that they tried to pass a bill to tackle illegal immigration and that darn Trump and the Republicans, they stopped it. Yeah, well, that bill would have allowed record number of illegals to continue to come in every month and would have done nothing to secure the borders. It was a garbage bill by a garbage party full of garbage politicians. That bill rightly died. Make no mistake, this takeover by foreign actors isn't happening only to our country. It's happening to all Western nations across the country. I just saw an article the other day that said that Sweden, nice, peaceful, beautiful Sweden, it's being rocked by illegal immigrant gang wars. A nation can't be a nation if it has no borders, if it has no standards, if it has no rules as to who can come in and who can't. And this again is being dictated through global efforts to try to level set every single nation into a malaise that will then be easily governed by a global system. That's not conspiracy. That's a stated fact. Now, along with that, record amounts of drugs, record amounts of human trafficking, and just a few weeks ago, we had the story come out that, just approximately 1/3 migrant children have, they've been lost in the United States by our current administration. Now, sure, Trump kept the kids in cages, which made AOC cry and take some photos, but he didn't lose 1/3 of them. And incidentally, those cages were built by Obama to hold kids and hold them in worse ways than Trump held them, just saying. But take a moment and think to yourself, what could be happening to those 323,000 children in this country right now? I mean, yes, odds are there are some who are living a wonderful life with wonderful, loving, parental, guardian-type figures. But how many are being sex trafficked right now? How many have been killed through whatever kind of abuse and disposed of? How many are being abused right now? This is the Democrat Party, mostly because they don't care one bit about children. I mean, kids are expendable. That's the reason they can't be bothered to keep track of them. That's why they want to murder them before they're born or right after. That's why they want to mutilate them inside and out. That's why they want to show them porn in school, especially gay porn. That's why they want to brainwash them. The left hates kids. Unless they can groom them for sex, perversion, and votes, then it's okay. Again, if you're a Christian and vote Democrat, the first thing isn't true. You simply cannot be a Christian and vote Democrat. I can see no way that's possible. Section 8 of their plan is, quote, advancing the president's unity agenda. Quote, since the day he took office, President Biden promised to be a president for all Americans. He knows that we agree on a lot more than we disagree on. Did he? Does he? And do we? I kind of feel like no on all of that. Personally, I think that this country is already in a cold civil war. The only question in my mind is how long will we continue with this unity charade, and then when will we finally admit the truth? And then will it be a violent civil war, or will it be a peaceful splitting of the nation? Now look, I know that's kind of a dark defeatist viewpoint, but personally, I can't see any way the two sides come together. They want to murder babies and mutilate kids and deny biological science. I don't. I'm not willing to move from my position because I'm right. They're not willing to move because they're psychotic. I don't believe this country can survive the amount of time it would take to unbrainwash these people. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe. So in this unity agenda, they want to beat the opioid epidemic. Okay, well look, they've done nothing for 4 years on this. Well, I won't say nothing. They've sued drug manufacturers and pharmacies like crazy, and they've put money into treating overdoses, but they've done nothing to actually beat it. But I guess Kamala will fix it in the next 4 years. They want to invest in mental health. Oh boy. Okay, look, I've said what I've said about the liberalism thing being a mental disorder. Look, poll after poll shows that those with mental disorders, psychosis, under the care of psychiatrists, taking various depression, anxiety, psychotic drugs, skews heavily to the left. And this is where I'll throw in some faith-based theory. The existence of God is plainly seen through what has been made. The laws of God are written on the hearts of every person. The left, in order to do what they do, believe what they believe, must deny the existence of the very being their subconscious knows exists. They literally must live in a world of delusion every day. They must force themselves to believe a lie. They must delude themselves from the moment they wake to the moment they fall asleep. There is no doubt that they would be more affected by mental disorders. Think of the person cheating on their spouse. Think of the person bilking their company. Eventually they snap. They give themselves away. This is what's happening to about half of the population right now. They're living a lie, and everything about them knows it. But they cover over those feelings with entertainment, drugs, sex, alcohol, constant noise and motion so they can invest as much as they want in mental health. But as long as they continue to live a lie, that babies aren't human, that men can be women, that children aren't of any worth, that helping someone kill themselves is being sympathetic, and on and on and on. As long as they deny reality, there isn't an investment possible that could help them in mental health. They have a section about protecting kids online, and with all due respect, shut up. As long as they want to put porn, straight or gay, in the elementary schools, just shut up about protecting children. They're going to, quote, end cancer as we know it. Yeah, look, we know that Biden made that promise. No, he hasn't done it yet, and no, he's not going to. This is nothing but an empty platitude. It sounds great. It's the moonshot of our day, is what we're told, except that they don't really care that much. In fact, Big Pharma makes too much money on cancer treatments and all their drugs intended to manage diseases, not cure them, to actually focus on curing cancer or anything. Curing diseases would be devastating to the pharmaceutical industry. They want to meet our, quote, sacred obligation to our veterans and our military. So in city after city, there are veterans who need help. They're sick, they're homeless, they're suffering from mental illness, and they're living on the streets, while those blue cities are pumping money into getting illegals into hotels and apartments and houses. So until they get that little glitch fixed there, don't talk to me about what you're going to do for our military. Go back to checking your watch or simply ignoring our veterans coming home in boxes because of your inept, incompetent leadership. And finally, the 9th section, quote, strengthening American leadership worldwide. Yeah, look, we're a joke in the world. And if you think that any country will take Kamala, the cackling DEI hire, more seriously than President Potato, you're fooling yourself. You know what didn't happen while Trump was president? These various invasions and attacks and wars. Yeah, Russia and Putin were quiet. China kept quiet. North Korea saber rattled like they always do. Then they shut up. Various Muslim countries left Israel alone. In fact, Trump moved the U.S. embassy to Jerusalem, something every other president was either scared to do, or I'm more inclined to believe they were told not to do it. They were not allowed to do so by their global overlords, and I'm talking presidents on the left and the right. Trump was actually able to get the Abrahamic Peace Accord signed, which was a normalization of relationship agreement between Israel and various Muslim nations, something that wasn't supposed to be able to be done. Biden came in and immediately Russia went into Ukraine. And of course, everything we're doing now and everything we're saying, it's absolutely saying that we want World War III to happen. Israel is attacked brutally. We ran out of Afghanistan with our tail tucked, leaving military personnel behind to be killed, leaving allies behind to be killed, leaving billions of dollars of our equipment behind for the Taliban, and leaving men, women, and children who we fought so hard to give them some form of freedom. We left them behind to once again be oppressed by these Muslim hordes. No, right now we're a laughing stock on the global scale. Every nation across the globe knows that we're weak. They knows that we have incompetent leadership. They know that we have leaders in places that hate our country. And they know that with Kamala, we collapse farther, giving bad actors across the globe more power. And that's their platform. They say a lot of things, but the reality is that they hate this country. They hate religion. They hate children. They hate conservatism. They hate a constitutional republic form of government. They hate the Constitution. They literally hate everything American about America. What they do love is the fact that they have the freedom based on the Constitution to destroy freedom and the Constitution. The direction they're pushing this country is towards socialism, Marxism, ultimately communism. This is a push on a global scale to create a one-world government. And no, I'm not going into end times prophecy here. This is just simply a fact where the global overlords, whether that's the UN or the WEF or some other group, manages the various sectors of the globe, manages production, manages distribution, manages everything. If that were to occur, it would result in likely hundreds of millions dead, if not into the billions, as that's the pattern of communistic government systems all throughout history. And incidentally, from a climate standpoint, billions dead is preferable because we have too many people. The Democrat Party is a dehumanizing party. They promote illegal immigration, which brings in massive amounts of drugs, which severely harms and kills our own citizens. And make no mistake, these huge drug busts that we see that happen on the border there in the news every once in a while, those are meant to be caught. Those were not seized. They were meant to be seized. in order to take the focus off of what's really coming into the country. They have a bloodlust to murder children before they're born, to murder people who decide that living is hard. If they can't kill children, they want to mutilate them inside with hormones, which generally eliminates their ability to have children or live a normal life in the future. They want to mutilate them outside with physical surgeries that can never be reversed. And they want to mutilate them mentally with brainwashing techniques by teachers, counselors, doctors, and psychiatrists. If they can't destroy them like that, and trust me, they're working hard to do so, they work to groom them into being sex objects in order to destroy them as much as possible. And if somehow these kids make it out of childhood, well, the game continues in adulthood, only they add in the promise of a life of being taken care of by the government, a lifelong government dependence because they care about you. They do not want to help or protect people. They don't want religion, specifically the Christian religion, to try to help kids with the confusion that's being forced on them. They don't consider churches, specifically Christian churches, to be vital or valuable. They don't want you or I to be able to defend ourselves or our families. They have no interest in allowing people to try to prosper, even with the understanding that we may fail. They believe in equality, as long as the right groups are more equal than others. They desire equity, which means they want to steal from the rich and give to the poor. The right kind of poor, sort of. Let's be very clear here. They don't believe in, nor do they like this country. We're nationalistic, we're discriminatory, and the best thing that could happen would be for our country to open the borders, nullify the Constitution, eliminate our military, and allow a global police force to take care of things. They use fear and ignorance in order to destroy our country. They've drilled the fear of climate change into people for a few generations now. This is now at the point where people, seemingly logical people, literally believe we can electrify everything using solar and wind power to power it and not collapse as a nation. People are now terrified of viruses to the point that they'll unthinkingly mask up and inject themselves with experimental drugs in order to save their lives. And if you dare even ask a question, you're a dangerous disinformation spreader and should probably be locked up or just killed. And the list goes on and on and on and on and on and on. Okay, so every election cycle we say that this is the most important election of our lives, and I'd argue that that's actually been correct for decades. Without trying to sound sensational, though, we're at a point right now where this election is critical. There are systems and plans that are being set up. They're close to being enacted, and if Kamala were elected, there's a real possibility that this will be the last true election this country will ever have. Now, I know that sounds like fear-mongering. I get that. But make no mistake, it's not fear-mongering. This is simply fact. They have the things set up to make this go away. Our country has a massive gulf between two ideologies, a gulf that, absent a miracle, will not be closed. Our country is at a tipping point. This election is less about the candidates and more about those two ideologies. The result of this election will determine who we are as a country. And to be honest, that kind of terrifies me because my own feeling and all polling basically says it's a 50-50 tie right now as to who is going to win. In theory, it could be a landslide. Either way, it's a matter of a few votes that will determine who wins. Christians must get off their false piety and vote. Not to vote is to vote. If you don't vote against the evil, you are complicit if the evil wins. Yes, I'm judging you if you choose not to vote, and I'm judging you if you vote for anyone on the left. Sorry if that offends you, but I'm actually not sorry at all. I'm right. The left is not just a different theory at this point. The left is vile, evil, and demonically controlled. Look, and the right isn't a whole lot better, in all honesty, but at least with the right, we maybe have a chance at pulling this country back. There are actual Christians that are still on the right. There are those who hold to Christian morals and ethics, even if they're not Christians, who are on the right. The left is simply demonic, a blood cult, a pagan society like the worst of the worst we see in the Bible. There is nothing in the Democrat platform, when you understand what they mean by what they're saying, that could agree with any sort of Christian principle. They are the epitome of evil, and about half of the nation agrees with them. That said, the Bible is still true. Every leader in every nation across the world is installed by God. If God didn't want that leader in a position of power, that leader wouldn't be there. All through history, as shown in the Bible, nations are either blessed or under judgment. Our nation is under judgment, and it has been for a long time now. Clinton, Obama, Biden, they were all elected as judgment on our nation. So were Bush Sr., W. Bush, and Trump. And regardless of if Trump or Harris gets in, make no mistake, we're still under judgment. Trump isn't a Christian. The party platform is being softened and moved to the left. We aren't doing anything in this nation that would even begin to warrant God's blessing. So even if Trump does win, this country is still being judged by God. But maybe he's giving us yet another reprieve, a chance to breathe, and yet another chance to make a choice to turn back to God. Although this Bible verse is often ripped out of its context, the spirit of the verse is correct. 1 Chronicles 7:14, if my people who are called by my name humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their evil ways, then I will listen from heaven, I will forgive their sins, and I will heal their land. Look, this is God speaking to Solomon after the temple was constructed, telling Solomon that if a time comes in the land of Israel where God's judgment has fallen on Israel, his chosen people, and drought and famine and pestilence comes upon the nation, if they turn back to him under that judgment and they sincerely repent, sincerely seek God, he will not ignore them. He will listen. He will remove judgment. Now, although we aren't Israel, this country is not the promised land. We're just a nation on the globe. The spirit of God's promise is true. If we as a nation were to repent and turn back to God and truly seek him, maybe he would be inclined to heal our land or heal our country, to remove his hand of judgment from us. He doesn't have to, but until we do our part, he has no reason to, and we'll never know if he would. So that starts with each and every one of us. Individually, we need to humble ourselves, pray, seek God's face, and turn from our evil ways. As churches, we need to do the same. As communities, as cities, then states, and as a nation. But it starts with you and I, with the individual. So let me wrap up this super extended segment with this. God is sovereign. This country is exactly where he ordained us to be before he created the first molecule of the universe. God is on the throne, and no one and nothing will change that fact. If the Democrats sweep the elections, don't cry cheating and fraud. Know that God ordained it to be. Our job as Christians doesn't change. May get a lot harder in this country, but it doesn't change. If Trump and the Republicans sweep the elections, don't go around gloating, don't cry out for vengeance, and absolutely do not fall into the false belief that we are now being blessed as a nation. We are not. Our job as Christians doesn't change. It may just be a little easier to do it, but it doesn't change. Let me wrap up with this. Psalm 115. Not to us, O Lord, not to us, but to your name give glory, for the sake of your steadfast love and your faithfulness. Why should the nations say, where is their God? Our God is in the heavens. He does all that he pleases. Their idols are silver and gold, the work of human hands. They have mouths, but do not speak, eyes, but do not see. They have ears, but do not hear, noses, but do not smell. They have hands, but do not feel, feet, but do not walk, and they do not make a sound in their throat. Those who make them become like them. So do all who trust in them. O Israel, trust in the Lord. He is their help and their shield. O house of Aaron, trust in the Lord. He is their help and their shield. You who fear the Lord, trust in the Lord. He is their help and their shield. The Lord has remembered us. He will bless us. He will bless the house of Israel. He will bless the house of Aaron. He will bless those who fear the Lord, both the small and the great. May the Lord give you increase. You and your children, may you be blessed by the Lord who made heaven and earth. The heavens are the Lord's heavens, but the earth he has given to the children of man. The dead do not praise the Lord, nor do any who go down into silence, but we will bless the Lord from this time forth and forevermore. Praise the Lord. And with that, sadly, we've reached the end of yet another episode of the Logical Christian Podcast. I feel we've bonded as we've laughed and cried and twisted our faces in incredulity. If you've enjoyed or found value in what you've heard, go on and do all the podcast things. And don't forget to check the show notes for links and contact info. Lawrence J. Peters said, against logic there is no armor like ignorance. Jesus told us that if you abide in my word, you are truly my disciples, and you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. So stay in the word, stay logical, stay faithful, and until next time, God bless.